the stairs now. A Quiet Place Part 2 is one of the most anticipated horror movies to be released in 2021. Who would have thought that Big Tuna from The Office would direct such a compelling, effective horror movie, especially one produced by none other than Michael Bay, the man responsible for giving us some of the most racist characters of all time in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen.
And a whole bunch of explosions that are very unnecessary at times.
You know what the amazing thing is that I counted one major explosion in A Quiet Place Part 2, and it wasn't even that big. But can you believe
Surprisingly.
that? I mean, given that this is a Platinum Dunes movie, Platinum Dunes is a production company responsible for some of the most terrible horror remakes in recent years, among them being Friday the 13th from 2009 and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003.
Okay, I mean, I can't say too much about the 2009 Friday the 13th because I kind of like that one a little bit.
It's not the greatest, but you know what? As I was saying as we left the theater, these are not Michael Bay's movies, these are John Krasinski's movies, and he has proven himself to be a very, very capable horror director. So guys, we are here to give our thoughts on A Quiet Place Part 2. And Kim, right off the bat, I have to ask you, did you like this movie more than the first?
From what I've seen on the first, because I've only saw the first half of it, I definitely say I was a little bit more on my seat with this one, and it kept me very entertained.
Yeah, definitely. So you only saw like half of the first one, you said?
Yeah, I was running off a little sleep, so I kind of fell asleep. Not because it was boring or anything.
Right. Just because it was a long night? I get it. Well, definitely watch the whole thing, because A Quiet Place is a movie that... You know, when I first watched it in the theater, it's funny because, you know, it had a lot of hype behind it. People were saying that it's one of the best horror movies to come out in recent years, and I watched it and I thought it was effective. I thought it had a very clever premise, but I will say I think I may have hyped myself up a little bit too much for it. And, you know, I thought it was a solid movie, and I thought it had some very well done, you know, horror sequences, but one thing that did bring that movie down a little bit for me, the ultimate design of the monsters, I didn't think was all that creative. Honestly, they kind of looked like every monster design that's come out since Cloverfield.
I agree.
They kind of looked like the creatures from Stranger Things.
Yes,
the Demogorgons.
Okay. You know, I didn't watch Stranger Things, but I did see, like, pictures and stuff, and I was sitting there trying to put my, like, try to figure out what it was I seen those big monsters from, so...
And the first movie, you know, was a very compact little thriller, and, you know, I have to say... Actually, let me ask you a question. So watching the trailer for this movie, I was afraid that John Krasinski was going to get a little bit too big, because with horror sequels in the past, filmmakers have often made the mistake of making their sequels grander and, you know, more bombastic. You know, they want to make them even bigger than the first installments. So watching the trailer, I was a little bit nervous that Krasinski would fall into that trap. I thought he was going to put a little too much into this movie, but do you think he found a good balance?
I think so.
Do you think he did a good job of expanding this world and, you know, showing essentially, you know, what's happened to the other people who are still alive at this point during the apocalypse?
I think so. I think they perfectly balanced it out where you got one story, I almost felt like one story and then another, and then it just kept going back and forth. I did like, though, like one thing that they did that was really cool was that when there was something big happening, you were almost like following both big things about to happen at once.
Yeah, from an editing perspective, there was a lot of cross-cutting in this movie. Like, characters would be in two completely different locations, you know, going through, you know, similar situations, and Krasinski would constantly cut back and forth. And I thought that was, honestly, some very impressive filmmaking.
Especially watching this movie, you're kind of like, one moment you're watching one character and then it goes to another, and you're like, no, I want to know what's happening to this other character that we just, you know. Also, guys, look at me right now, okay? Look at this. This was literally me throughout most of the runtime. Like, I didn't even want to eat any popcorn during this movie. Like, I had my bucket like in front of me, and I was, you know, carefully picking, you know, every individual piece of popcorn. Chewing quietly,
putting it quietly into my mouth because I didn't want to make a single disturbance.
Didn't want to make no noises either, you know.
But you know what? that's just the sign of good filmmaking. I think that Krasinski had us all in his grip.
Yeah, because I literally was clenching the seats. Like,
I know you
there
were.
was like,
I think you damaged the seat. I think you're gonna have to pay the movie theater some money.
I think so too.
But you know, I will say this. So I compared the first Quiet Place movie to like an M. Night Shyamalan feature, particularly the 2002 movie Signs. Signs was a movie that almost worked. It was a bit pandering, and it was a bit on the nose. Shyamalan isn't the most subtle filmmaker in the world, but the first Quiet Place, you know, had some similar ideas. You know, a similar environment. You know, it took place, you know, out in the wilderness on this farm. You know, they were surrounded by these crops. You know, they were being attacked by these otherworldly aliens. But Krasinski, with the first Quiet Place, you know, he didn't want to pander to anyone. He just wanted to make an effective thriller. He wanted to make a solid little movie, and he wasn't trying to shove any, you know, messages down anyone's throats. And that's what I appreciated about A Quiet Place. It was the M. Night Shyamalan movie M. Night Shyamalan wanted to make, you know, back in the day, but often failed. So Kim, the opening sequence of this movie, was that not the best opening sequence that you've seen all year?
It definitely was, because that was like the start of me just literally in my seat, like, whoa, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah. And again, you know, we're not going to spoil too much, but I love these kind of movies because, you know, they often begin in these quiet small towns, you know, where we see, you know, people, you know, living out their lives, and, you know, we see how they function, you know, as a community, and then something, you know, drastic happens. You know, I like to compare it to a movie called The Crazies, which came out like in 2010. The Crazies is a movie that also took place in this small town. Something devastating happens, and we see, you know, how it affects the people in this tiny community.
Mm-hmm.
The opening sequence was like that.
It definitely was.
It showed essentially what happened on the first day of this invasion, and there's some very, very just high-level filmmaking going on. There's long takes.
Mm-hmm.
You learn about certain characters' quirks, particularly the young son. The young son is supposed to be the timid one of the group, and, you know, not to give away too much, but, you know, in the opening scene, he's playing a game of baseball, and he's afraid to, you know, hit, you know, the pitches that are being thrown at him. So it establishes him as a very timid, you know, kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the opening sequence, my God, it was chilling, it was intense, and it got us hooked right off the bat.
And then even like, yep, up to the end, or before they had the credits and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you came all the way up here. There's nothing left.
There are people out there. People worth saving.
So, Kim, was there anything about this film that either annoyed or disappointed you?
annoyed, yes, I would have to say.
Do tell.
I would have to say I don't know if he's the oldest. I think the girl's the oldest, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe so, yeah.
The boy,
Mhm.
the oldest boy. He kind of got on my nerves a little bit. Annoyed me at times. There's a particular scene in here, like, I was literally just sitting there thinking, what the heck are you doing? Like, some of the decisions he was making was just, they weren't good, and they were very, like,
Oh,
and they were just common sense ones where I was like, how?
I heard you whispering under your breath
Yeah.
during those sequences. I just heard you, whispering under your breath, like, what the fuck are you doing?
I know, I was like,
Yeah.
it's like you just wanted to go through and slap him.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what the son does, at the end, it does redeem him as a character, but some of the decisions he makes in this movie are just incredibly aggravating.
I don't get why he had to come out of the thing. Like, that there was no point or purpose besides that he wanted to wander, but why would you want to wander and...
Yeah, it honestly doesn't make sense, when you're trying to lay low and, you're not trying to, make any noise. It may not be the best idea to, wander off
And any
by
typical
yourself.
kid's not going to want to wander if they've seen what they've seen.
Right. I'm not going to say he's your stereotypical stupid horror character. I mean, he, isn't quite at the level of someone, like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, he does redeem himself, at the end of the movie. I'm not going to give away the final scene, but let's just say that this movie is all about growing up and, stepping into adulthood and, confronting your fears and, basically, standing up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
adapting to this very violent world, and you're being forced to leave your childhood behind. And that was ultimately part of the message of the film. But yeah, this young son, man, there were just certain points where I wanted to just slap him outside the head. Like, what are you doing?
I don't know why this should. I get what he was doing in this one scene where he was trying for survival.
Uh-huh.
But I wanted to slap the heck out of him when he kept taking that baby's breathing machine. It was like,
oh, the oxygen
and he
tank?
was just greedily taking. I'm like, this baby needs it. So,
yeah, our friend Brian actually made a good point. In this film, characters did things just for the sake of the plot, just so that the plot would move forward, and he is responsible for most of those things, like the son.
mm-hmm.
He's the character who has to make certain decisions just because the plot needs to move forward. So he's the character that makes the dumb decisions. He's that kind of character in this movie. And something else I was kind of afraid of. So I had a theory that they were going to kill off Emily Blunt early on in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
because when I heard that the movie was ultimately about growing up and stepping into adulthood, I thought that they were going to get rid of her character, forcing the kids to adapt to this world by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't really a spoiler, but they don't do that.
Yeah.
I was a little afraid that they were kind of going to push Emily Blunt off to the side, that she wasn't really going to do much, because it does kind of shift to Cillian Murphy and the young daughter, because they need to get to this destination. Because I'm not going to give it away, but they're going to a place because they have a goal in mind. Emily Blunt stays behind with the young, dumb son. And I was afraid that she wasn't going to do much, but she does.
Yeah. She still had some major stuff that she had to get done, but at the same time, I felt like you said, with the kids growing up
Mm-hmm.
and doing things, they had to, figure things out on their own, while
Mm-hmm.
she had to go do what she needed to do for them.
Yeah, and she is also the most badass looking female in a horror movie since Ellen Ripley in Aliens. And like Ellen Ripley in Aliens, she does this thing where she'll often have her baby in one hand and she'll have a gun in the other. That's very similar. That's very, that reminds me of the poster of Aliens, where Sigourney Weaver is holding that young girl in one arm and she has the machine gun in the other. It's the spitting image of a badass mother.
Right. I think the one thing that made me always on the edge of my seat was the fact that whenever a movie or show, because I've seen The Walking Dead do this too,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a baby in an apocalyptic world
Mm-hmm.
like that, you're always fearing for the baby because the baby's so vulnerable,
Oh yeah, they better not kill the baby.
Yeah, I better not kill the baby. That's up there with our animals and stuff like that in general for me. But
Some horror movies have done that. Some horror movies have killed off baby characters. The one that instantly pops up in my head is The Witch from 2016. That heartfelt film.
I didn't watch that one. No, I'm kind of like...
It's a very touching movie. It'll just leave you feeling very good by the end. I think The Witch would, put a smile on your face.
Hey, another good one is the one that pops up in my head. It's not even a baby. It's just kids in general. It's mom and dad, but almost a baby. Almost.
Mom and Dad starring Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
As a parent, I just have to ask, did that movie make you feel a bit uncomfortable?
It did. I think I was pregnant with my daughter when I watched that, so it made me really uncomfortable. It was after my son went to bed,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting there watching it. By the end of that movie, I was like, I'm gonna go check on him and make sure he's
Actually, since we're on that note, let me ask you. Emily Blunt does make a choice in this movie at one point to, leave her son behind and, go off on her own. She has a reason for it, but
Mm-hmm.
what did you think of that? Did you think it was sensible for her to do that?
For what she had to do, it would be a very hard decision because you don't want to leave your kid and your baby behind at any point. But at the same time, if you took them, there was that liability that something could happen. But if you knew you had to get something done, and in her case, she had to go and find some more oxygen
Mm-hmm.
for the baby.
Right.
And it's a more sensible thing. It's your mother instinct. You see that the oxygen level is going low. You got to do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if the safest thing is for the kid, for her son to be there with the baby while she goes and gets it done, I thought the decision would have been really hard, but I think she did the right choice rather than just try to take them with her.
Yeah. And actually, you know what's interesting? The first film, I think, was more about, you know, the sacrifices parents make when it comes to protecting their kids. This movie, it felt like it was more about the sacrifices young children can make when it comes to protecting their parents. I mean, you've seen the first film. I mean, Big Tuna does die at the end of the first film. I keep calling him Big Tuna just because I'm such a big fan of The Office. By the way, I was very disappointed that Andy Bernard didn't show up at some point in this movie. He would have showed up in one of the attack sequences, yelling, "Rid-a-did-do-do!" Anyway, so did I like A Quiet Place Part 2 more than the first film? Not quite. I would say it wasn't as fresh as the first film, and I liked that the first film was much more confined. It was a bit more subdued. This film, the novelty did wear off a little bit, and you know, I liked. Here's one thing that I really liked about this movie. It did have an optimistic viewpoint of humanity. Not to give anything away, but there's a scene involving Cillian Murphy and another person. They have this conversation, and I just think it's a conversation we all needed to hear, especially given recent events. And I will say this is a good movie to watch, you know, in a theater. Would you agree with that?
I definitely do.
There were people crying during this movie. Did you notice that? There was sniffling.
There was, and I'm going to tell you right now, there was a baby in that theater, and I didn't even realize there was a baby because the whole time I'm thinking the baby noises is coming from the movie.
You know what? I saw that woman walking into the theater.
First of all, I don't think I would even want to bring my kid into a baby or not into a theater, but
that was trippy.
Especially that kind of movie.
That was trippy because, I mean, there were scenes where Emily Blunt is carrying her baby.
And you hear the coos and the baby cries. You're like, is the baby in the movie?
Is this real life or is this fantasy?
The whole time you're sitting there just like, they gotta be quiet. Why are you crying?
It's like the movie. It's like the movie has escaped from the screen.
Right.
It's entered our world. That was bizarre, man.
You're just for a moment thinking, oh god, they're gonna come out the monsters and whatever. And it's like, oh no, it's just the baby in the theater.
That was trippy though. I just have to say that. So Kim, would you recommend seeing A Quiet Place Part 2?
I definitely would.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't want to compare just yet because I want to watch the first one from beginning to end.
That's fair.
But I mean, honestly, from just this one alone, I definitely recommend it. I liked it.
You know, I think I might give you the silent treatment until you watch the first movie in its entirety. So,
again, I did not fall asleep because it was boring. Because it was not.
Yes. Oh, and one more thing that I got to say about this movie. It was so good seeing Cillian Murphy in a lead role because he's always been one of those underrated actors. He was mesmerizing in a Wes Craven film called Red Eye, which we did do a video for. All of us did. Wes Craven's most underrated movie. It
took me half the movie to realize which one was him.
Yep. It was like seeing Batman Begins all over again because, you know, he played the Scarecrow in that movie.
Did an excellent job.
An excellent job. But no, I love Cillian Murphy. John Krasinski has proven himself to be a very effective horror director. And actually, one more thing I want to say before we, end things here. So, I made a comment, or I wrote a post recently on my social media talking about how comedians are making the best horror movies nowadays. You know, John Krasinski, Jordan Peele, and someone commented and they were like, yeah, it's because comedians know, you know, real anxiety. And comedy is all about build up and release. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So comedians are the ideal artists to make horror movies because they know that anxiety, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. And John Krasinski, I love you, man. Keep making more of these. Would you want to see A Quiet Place Part 3?
I do. This one, I mean, without spoiling anything, it definitely sets you up for a possibility on a Part 3. And that was my first thought once this movie ended was, are they going to make a Part 3? Because I definitely will be spending money to go watch it.
They could do a crossover with the Conjuring movies. Quiet Place Part 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. We're going to be seeing that next week, by the way, guys. We're very excited for The Conjuring 3.
Yes.
I enjoy those movies.
I do too.
And yeah, so definitely get out and see A Quiet Place Part 2, you know, preferably in the theater because this is a movie that warrants it.
It gives you that atmosphere feel.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But yes, guys, those are our thoughts on A Quiet Place Part 2. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to our spooky channel, Around the Cloud Frights. We are going to deliver you more horrific content here very soon. We have a lot of awesome videos like in the works, things we are really excited to share with you guys.
And there's a lot of horror movies coming out this year.
Yes. Halloween Kills. Oh my god, that was supposed to come out last October. That's finally coming out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Candyman.
And Candyman. Halloween Kills probably my second most anticipated movie of the year. Right behind Peter Rabbit 2. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No, I would have to say Halloween Kills was my first.
Okay.
Then my second would be The Conjuring 3.
That's coming out next week.
And that's coming out next week.
We're ready. All right, guys. Thank you again. And Kim, I thank you again for joining me in this discussion. And yeah, guys, go see A Quiet Place Part 2. Please.
And while you're in there, please be quiet.
Quiet. And don't bring your kids or your babies, please. Anyway, have a good night, boys and ghouls. Take care. Stay spooky.